Here to discuss that possibility, my former congressional colleague. He was metaphorically called the giant killer when he dispatched the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Dan Rostenkowski, back in 1994. Now, the president of Flanagan Consulting, Michael Patrick Flanagan. Good to have you back on America's Forum, Mike.
Always glad to be here with you, JD.
So, the government shutdown. What do you think? Should there be a long-term bill, or should there be a continuing resolution that runs till about February 1st?
Well, Congress was arguing about whether or not certain tax breaks should be extended in short-term or longer term. The president threatened to veto that concept, so I think they're stuck with something that'll get them just into next year, and that's the right way to go. Shutting down the government is not a good idea. Politically, it never redounds to our benefit, but governmentally, this kind of craziness need not happen. We can get ourselves through the next few months into the next year and get the regular budget cycle going without great harm to the Republic.
Of course, our friend Peter King was arguing that, gee, this funding should go clear on through till next September, saying there are other battles, other questions that need to be fought. But you differ with that approach.
Yeah, I think that there are a number of tax issues. The Senate is writing a bill now, the Senate Republicans are, and actually the Senate Democrats came through with what they were almost had done was a pretty good tax bill that the House almost was ready to play with, and they could have done something real well with here at the end, and the president threatened a veto on that. So I think they need to just get through and have this tax fight early, get it over with, but without the specter of a government shutdown, and then they can move on and budget the nation.
We talked before, of course, as you grew up in Chicago, and of course, as Barack Obama made his home in Chicago following graduating from Yale Law School, you kind of have some insights into the way that our current president thinks. Perhaps we would call it the Chicago way. So you've got the unilateral action on amnesty. You've got a Congress dealing with funding. What is at stake here for President Obama? What do you think he is trying to do politically right now?
I absolutely believe he wants to maintain the initiative. He wants to be in charge. He wants to be the center of all things. And it's not going to work out that way. This government is run by Congress. The Article 1 branch of our government is Congress. Article 1, Section 1, all legislative power is vested in a Congress. Congress runs the show in this town and runs the government, essentially. The president implements laws, and for him to continue to want to be at the forefront of the legislative process, which is essentially what he wants, is fighting a battle he frankly can't win without really wielding the veto pen every third day and doing executive orders. The government places great trust and confidence in the administration to run foreign policy, and he would do better to focus on that, train wreck though it is around the world, so that he could actually make a mark there. And that's where most presidents make their mark, because that's the place they have the widest latitude of influence and power.
About a minute remains in this segment, Mike. Let's return to Congress and to the organization that you and I belong to, the House Republican Conference. John Boehner expected to hang on his position, but a lot of grumbling amongst conservatives and backbenchers. Is there any threat out there to the Boehner speakership?
I don't think so. And I'll tell you, I think John's a terrific guy, and I think he's going to be a great speaker for at least another term. Henry Hyde once said to me, I was sitting on the House floor having a terrible time with a series of votes that I absolutely couldn't bring myself to do, but we had to govern, and there were some votes that were very tough for me. And Henry sat next to me and patted me on the knee and said, "What's wrong, Mike?" And I told him, and he says, "I have a problem with these votes too, but I'm going to vote yes." And I said, can you do that?" And he said, "You can't." And I said, "I have trouble with it." And he says, "You need to find new work." And I said, "Goodness gracious, Henry, what are you talking about?" And he says, "Compromise is our business. You move the needle as you can. You can't change the world overnight, and you shouldn't imagine being able to do it. Legislation that works like that is very bad." So I think there are a lot of Tea Party members particularly who need to learn that lesson.
And we will take that under advisement. I hate to cut you off right here. We're going to bring you back. More with Mike Flanagan on the other side of this break. Let's continue our conversation with the former congressman from Illinois, from Chicago specifically, Michael Patrick Flanagan, currently the president of Flanagan Consulting. Mike, before the break, before we were rudely interrupted there, you were talking about Henry Hyde. You guys were on the floor, and our late great friend, said that compromise is the business of Congress. I appreciate the point you're making. What I found to be the case, however, is that Washington defined compromise by Republicans and conservatives caving in to what the Democrats and the Washington press corps wanted to see happen. So how do you have effective compromise in Washington?
Well, that's a great question. And you, of course, are exactly correct. Compromise from the president's point of view is you come to my point of view, and then we will agree, and then we have compromise when he didn't move an inch. And this is the CEO mentality. And I'm not so sure that that's a bad attitude for a president to have. It's a terrible attitude for a Senate Majority Leader to have. It's a terrible attitude for a member of the House to have. The business is to take care of your constituency. And I don't want to get too lost in theory here, but you know, I don't think I ever voted with Mrs. Pelosi once when I was there. But the 750,000 people she represents on the floor of Congress have just as much right to have their view represented as my people did. And that's why the art of compromise is important, is because we all work for the common good and the interest of 300 million Americans, not just the ones that agree with us right now. And so you move, when you're in the majority, you move the needle in your direction incrementally. You can't have all the votes at once. And I think the biggest difficulty with the Tea Party class right now, great guys all, great gals all, is that they come from the CEO class. They're not long in politics. I wasn't, you weren't either, JD, but they don't have a background in politics, and they don't have a background in compromise. They're from the CEO class. They make a decision happens. And their kind of view is, we have the votes, let's vote and get it done. When you do that, you get stuff like the Affordable Care Act. You've got to get both sides involved, and you've got to get a good piece of legislation that we can all agree with. And that's hard to do.
Of course, the president has to sign it. And while president, regardless of party, can say, I'm standing right here in the final analysis, there does have to be some compromise from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, we saw it, ironically, with Bill Clinton eventually during our time in Washington, but Mr. Obama shows no inclination. Is he going to surprise us these last 2 years, or is he just locked in ideologically and attitudinally as the CEO who doesn't move?
Yeah, great question. I think Mr. Obama showed he understands the concept, because if you remember when the Affordable Care Act was moving, they ridiculed him regularly for not taking the leadership and not defining what the bill should be and not forcing through a big government solution. And he said, no, Congress needs to work its will and provide a bill to me that I can sign. His attitude on that will be completely different when the Congress isn't dominated by Democrats but dominated by Republicans, and his attitude will be, Dr. No, he'll veto everything that comes across his way. I don't see him seeing it our way on any level, to any degree. It's going to be 2 years of very difficult times in dealing with the White House.
2 minutes remaining. We want to call on your expertise as a Chicago guy. This curious report released by Judicial Watch that Oprah Winfrey was targeted, or at least her Chicago studio was the target of a terrorist attack that thankfully was foiled. According to the report, the terrorists were planning to bring a U-Haul full of explosives there to the front of her studio and blow it up. Apparently, one of the guys is detained now in the slammer in El Paso. Chicago as a terror target, and Oprah as a terror target.
Well, Disney got a no-fly zone over all their parks. Maybe we should have a mobile no-fly zone over Oprah. Wherever she goes, we'll just have a big circle around her where you can't fly over her, and have her chauffeur hooked into air traffic controllers everywhere that can't fly over Oprah. Okay, Harpo Studios is in Chicago. It's on the West Loop. It's a 2-story building. It would have been a disaster if a truckload of explosives showed up there and would have hurt a lot of people. But I don't think Oprah was the target. I think it was the collection of people that are around Oprah that was the target. If Oprah were the target, she wouldn't be with us now. She's not exactly a hard target to get to.
But thankfully, she's not, and we're all grateful. That the thing
yes,
of visibility.
Absolutely.
She's a talented woman. But Chicago, for years, Mike, they called it the second city. If nothing else, is this a reminder that terrorists take a look at major metropolitan areas like your hometown as a target? 30 seconds.
Yeah, the Willis Tower, formerly the Sears Tower, was actually a target. as well as Oprah. And you know, as the tallest building in the United States, or there's some new category that it fits in. It's big, it's bulky, it's heavy, it's muscular, it's Chicago. That's the kind of thing that we should be more focused on, I think, than providing specific safety measures for specific famous personalities from terrorist attacks. I think we have to kind of be vigilant about everything all the way around. And I, of course, join the world in the happy that Oprah was unharmed, but also that the people at Harpo Studios were unharmed.
And
as well.
that Chicago averted an attack. Mike Flanagan, thanks so much.